Welcome to day 3. In this lesson, we are going to be taking a deep dive into survival mechanisms or our survival instincts. So this next part here that I'll be sharing, I'm sure most people have heard of these before. It's probably nothing new. But again, it's not so much about the information, it's how you use the information. And so I'll be really dissecting this next bit here so you could really begin to understand how you're either using this information to your advantage or you're unconsciously using it against yourself. So, us humans have a survival mechanism that often causes self-sabotage in our career, personal practices, habit formations, or even the courses that we take. There's 6 main concepts to be aware of. All decisions made by human beings are to avoid pain or gain pleasure. People will do much more to avoid pain than they will to gain pleasure. The perception, we talked about perception, of pain and pleasure, not the actual pain and pleasure, is the main driving force for people. We primarily focus on avoiding immediate pain, and we are trying to attain immediate pleasure. Every decision you make results in at least one or more of the following: short-term pain, long-term pain, short-term pleasure, long-term pleasure. And finally, emotions trump logic when thinking of pain and pleasure, right? Something that is quite common. However, now let's look at a deeper aspect to this. We will avoid pain or discomfort on the physical level, just like touching a hot stove, the emotional level, avoiding somebody's rage or uh, any negative emotion for that matter, and then the mental level. Now, oftentimes we can have mental definitions. There's two components here: mental definitions and assumed conclusions within ourselves. So basically, all of these things can really be looked at from within the self. Physical pain. Oh, I don't want to look at that pain. I want to, avoid it. Go get immediate attention, get somebody else to fix it. If we have some type of illness or disease, a lot of the time we don't want to find out what's actually happening. We just want it fixed. We just want it healed. But a lot of the time, when we actually look into things, we can learn what actually got us there in the first place and how to reverse it. Same with the emotions. Emotions is really interesting because a lot of people, when they generate a lot of negativity within them, what happens is we want to avoid that negative emotion we're generating. And what happens? Well, when we're trying to avoid an emotion that's inside of us, what do? We seek immediate pleasure. We're going to things that are highly addicting, like drugs or alcohol or caffeine. Anything that makes us feel pleasure. Eating, emotional eating. Because we're trying to get away from that emotion that we're generating inside of our body. Well, obviously, that's going to allow us to have a lot more of an addictive personality. Then, of course, there's the mental level of how we avoid pain or discomfort. And this can be our definitions, how we define certain things, or our assumed conclusions. So, when we gather information in our world about a certain situation or circumstance, a lot of the time, again, we're humans we don't want to use up brain power. So we're often lazy when it comes to finding or looking into information. And we make assumptions with very limited information because when we're asking too many questions, it's a lot of work, right? Our brain has to process a whole bunch of information, and we want to avoid that. We want to conserve energy. So most of the time, humans, we have formed, we create limited assumptions. And same with our definitions. Our definitions oftentimes are very vague. Most people have definitions of words that they never even looked up in the dictionary before. It's quite interesting when you really get into human psyche, just how funny and how funny it is, how lazy we sometimes are. And it really comes down to survival instincts. That's why, day two with increasing your energy intake, making sure you have a high amount of energy that can really solve a lot of issues when it comes to defining our life, looking into, our conclusions, our assumptions, our perceptions, changing our perceptions, changing the level how beneath the emotional level. Why are we generating those negative emotions? How can we solve that? Well, that takes energy of processing, and when we have a high enough energy level, then all of a sudden it becomes doable. So we can have multiple definitions of the same thing. So I really want to talk about definitions because this is where there's often quite a disconnect with many things in our life that causes self-sabotage. And so our mental definition can be out of sync with emotional definitions. So let me explain this. Our mental definition of work can be a physical or mental effort. So work, in the example of work is a physical or mental effort or activity directed towards the production or accomplishment of something. So that's the basics of work, our mental definition. However, the emotional definition of work can be a dreadful job that I hate but feel forced to do. So there can be absolutely so many emotional definitions. Many people have different definitions of work. Uh, but the mental definition, oftentimes is just looked up in the dictionary. Okay, well, what is work? What is the mental definition of work versus somebody's emotional definition? That's all based upon their beliefs, their perception of certain things, how they were maybe raised, and how they relate to their jobs or their job or any type of work for that matter. And all that can be changed. It can be redefined on an emotional level. So, emotional definition of work. So, if we have a negative experience with work at a young age, maybe we related negativity towards work, and that could have just been parents teaching us an approach that we didn't fully understand, or maybe we had a bad experience when we were young at a job. Maybe the boss was not that great of a person, didn't have communication or emotional intelligence. And so, if we have a negative experience with work at a young age, or even watching someone else have a negative relationship with work, later in life, we most likely won't create an enjoyable relationship with working and be continuously dreading work. So I know that when I grew up, I love my parents dearly, but I noticed as a kid, they would always come home and they'd be stressed out. They would be very stressed out about work. Sometimes, have anger or some type of emotion like that. And I noticed that the average of how they came home was a little bit more stressed out, a little bit more, negatively charged emotions towards work. And this shaped the way I looked at it. And I actually started out with having a negative emotion towards work. I learned by studying my parents how they looked at work, and it was just through synchronicity that that it changed the way I had a relationship. Um, if I make sense there. So, anyways, the emotional definitions of work can be so many different things. It could be passionate, joyful, or exciting, stressful or dreadful. Addicting could be either good or bad type of addiction. And so looking at how we define the things that we do, not just work, it could be things like personal development, our emotional definitions of relationships, how we connect with other people, how we connect with our hobbies, how we connect with life, or nature, being out in nature, how we present ourselves. There's so many different definitions, emotional definitions that can be formed through different experiences. And so know that, at a young age, I had a very terrible relationship with work because of just the onset, but then also my own personal experience. Because once a person starts with the perception, perhaps by learning from somebody else, oh, work is negative, work is stressful. And then once we form that perception, then all we're looking for in our day is how stressful it can be, or how emotionally negative work is, and that compound or that builds a momentum. So now when I was going through that process, my own experience, I found that, yeah, work really sucked. I found it very dreadful growing up and into my early 20s, going into my 30s. But then all of a sudden I realized this information I'm teaching you about how to change perception, the power of perception, understanding how to get beneath the emotions, start working on subconscious level, and really beginning to know that there's so many other ways to look at these definitions. Understanding that, oh, if I increase my energy intake, now all of a sudden I have more brain power and I could start to investigate different ways of looking at how I could redefine my relationship with work. And now I love it. I love work. I can't get enough of it sometimes, and it actually has turned into a really good addiction in great ways, I would have to say. I am a little bit of a workaholic, but I balance it out quite nicely too. So, setting yourself up for success. What are your definitions of work? Or perhaps working to change. Maybe you want to change yourself, or you want to change habits. So what are your definitions of changing habits? Do you find work in your life or your inner work to be enjoyable? Do you have a smidge of negativity towards working or towards transformation or personal change? Sometimes when it comes to personal development, people say, "Oh, well, if I change myself, then all of a sudden I'm gonna have to change my reality." And oh, change might not be a good thing. Somebody defines change to be, or however somebody defines change to be. But know that change can be very exciting. Change or transformation can be so fulfilling. It can be so enlightening. It's like, oh, wow, my whole world all of a sudden got so much easier just because I changed something that really wasn't working for me towards something that is really working for me. And it's exciting watching it change. And I mean, change is a given, right? Look at the seasons. Look at how the anything, everything is changing all the time. The days are going from day to night to day to night to day to night. And the vibration of everything is always vibrating, and everything's always changing. So it's funny how sometimes people get negative towards change. But it is just, again, your orientation, your perspective of change. Maybe something happened to you at a very young age where you thought, oh, change is actually a bad thing because something terrible happened. But really, change is change. You can't really define it to be good or bad. It's neutral. Change is a given. Everything is changing. But if you can relate to that in a very exciting way, because now you get to experience something new. All right, so that's enough for that tangent. But going back to, do you have a smidge of negativity towards something, towards work or personal development? Because even that tiniest bit of negativity is enough to keep people from doing their practice or doing a task or going to work. The tiniest bit of "I have to do this" will often be what keeps people from doing a practice. Or maybe it's going to the gym, working out, maybe it's doing yoga or any type of meditation, right? So our survival mechanism gets triggered in the moment, and then we avoid or procrastinate subjectively with what we are intending to do. So procrastination at its finest is this: it's looking at a task that you have to do, and if for some reason you define it to be slightly more negative than positive, guess what? You're going to procrastinate. You're going to try to move away from that task and towards pleasure. That's procrastination at its finest. You don't have to overcomplicate it. It's not overcomplicated. Survival instincts. And so it's just about looking at those definitions. So instead, to use different instead using I have to do this, change up the words. I get to do this. This is exciting. Uh, change your self-talk, how you look at something, how you approach something, how you perceive something. Maybe asking, well, how is this going to be good for me? What are the benefits of this? How is this going to be pleasurable? How can I make this pleasurable? How can I make this exciting? Maybe I don't want to do this task, but hey, once it's done, it's going to be great. How can I enjoy the experience and learn about myself? Whatever it may be. Have a vision outcome that inspires you. Know what you're doing, know how you can get to the end goal, and have that vision so ingrained or so clear in your mind that it actually does inspire you to get going. Okay, so isolating the pain. So we're going to look at a more simplified viewpoint of how you could actually start doing the work and changing those definitions, changing those emotional definitions, even changing the mental conclusions or the mental assumptions or definitions that we create for ourselves. So the main issue with avoidance is that the topic, circumstance, or subject of what we are avoiding is a summary of many pieces or parts. And so now this is generalizing. There's always pieces or parts to any situation or circumstance. There's a relationship of us, who we are, compared to the situation or circumstance. So there's two parts right there. But you could even break that down even further. So we will avoid the summary of a topic when the pieces or parts are unclear. So when we look at a circumstance, we often will just see the summary of everything that is composed within that circumstance or situation. But when really there are many pieces and parts that make up that entire situation or circumstance. And when it's unclear, our brain doesn't want to process and try to pick out the pieces, but it's going to help so much. So when what we are really trying to avoid or move away from is a piece or part within the summary of what we are avoiding. Let me say that again. What we are really trying to avoid or move away from is a piece or part within the summary of what we are avoiding. Because, I mean, let's just be real. If you're actually doing something, then there's got to be a benefit to it, or else, you simply wouldn't find yourself doing that thing. Maybe the benefit is going to a job and earning money. Well, there you go. You're earning money. That's a benefit. So, I mean, obviously, if you really hate your job, then, it might be best to go look for a new one. Or maybe it's a chore or a task that you know that it's going to be good. Maybe it's benefit of helping out and whatever it may be. Oftentimes, it's not the actual thing; it's a piece within the task or a part within the task that we're really not liking. A lot of times, our definition that we're really not liking. So the pieces or parts of a summary can be more easily solved when isolated. When we see the entire summary, it can be a lot for the mind to handle, becoming overwhelmed, so we avoid it altogether. Avoidance is directly relatable to self-sabotage. So a great way to solve this avoidance, and it doesn't take as much brain power as people think. The best thing you can do is grab a pen and paper and begin to identify all the parts or pieces of the summary of the topic. So the circumstance or subject. And this can show up, here's just some examples, a lack of intention, lack of responsibility, an avoidance of communication, a part that is unknown, a small fear that is associated to a part. I mean, it could be so many different things, but most of the time it is a piece or a part, a definition, something that we actually are avoiding when the rest of it's okay. I remember when doing chores. Well, a chore is a chore. Yeah, it's a responsibility. But it wasn't so much the chore because when I'm feeling really good and excited, yeah, the chore is great. It goes fast. It's really easy. The chore is the chore. Action is action, but how I relate to it all of a sudden can change. Oh, now all of a sudden I relate to it in a negative way and I avoid it. Now all of a sudden I relate to it in a positive way and I'm actually just doing it. So take time to dissect and identify the full spectrum of the avoidance, the topic that you are self sabotaging. You may find that with clarity, all all the parts, all of a sudden you solve your avoidance. All of a sudden, hey, well, I know what to look at, and well, that's a lot easier to deal with now, right? So by identifying all parts and pieces of a summary, you will then know what to work on with mental ease. A small part to process, and it may be a very simple small part to process. So simple that it's almost instantaneously solved. A lot of the time it is. So from here, you can more easily find a solution. It may be as simple as changing perspectives or becoming resourceful and finding information that will teach you how to, the how to action steps, what to write, what to say, what to do, or how to perform to get the preferred outcome. So of course, there's so many different subjects in the world. There's so many different topics, and I'm just trying my best to be, quite generalized. But I'm sure you get the point. I really dissect and identify all parts that you possibly can. So the last lesson that I'll have will better explain what to do if you run into a belief to do with emotional avoidance, which stem from belief systems. This will be explained in further detail in that lesson. So just to go a little bit farther with this, do not just isolate the pain, isolate the benefits as well. Take time to dissect and identify the full spectrum of the benefits or what you are wanting to move towards. This will help you get super clear and focused on what you actually want. You may find your goals are out of order and you're manifesting a longer, more difficult process that may be pointless to you. When you start to really get super clear and focused of what you actually want or what you are actually moving towards, the benefit, everything just gets a lot more simple. Life gets simple. Life gets super easy when you understand, okay, what am I actually moving towards? What are the benefits? You might also find you become more motivated and aligned with ease when you know exactly the benefits, isolating everything you're moving towards, knowing clearly what you're moving towards. I've personally found that my motivation skyrockets. It gets so much more activated within myself. So why take a longer route to get where you want to go? Cut out the stuff that you simply don't need. Get super clear with the pieces or parts that you truly prefer. You might find that there are easier arrangements of those parts or benefits. Do not think it has to happen a certain way because you never truly know how something will happen. Universe can present so many different ways for something to happen. The mind sometimes gets in the way. So things can come in ways outside of your perspective. You truly don't know how something can happen. If you really want a goal or if you really have a vision, but you think, oh, I need to go step A, step B, step C to get all the way to this vision. Well, you don't actually know that fully. There may be an easier way of getting there. When you actually know what you're moving towards and what you are attempting to get to, you may find that, hey, there is a better way. So if you are attempting to do something you've never done before or that you don't know how to do, you do not know. You simply do not know. You don't know. Because if you know, you know. Actions and knowing are synonymous, meaning you just do it, like brushing your teeth or driving your car. Once you know how to do it, you do it. When you don't know how to do something, there may be avoidance, there may be situations that you are avoiding in some way, shape, or form. So when you actually know what to do, how to do it, most of the time you just do it. When everything is in alignment with your definitions, when your emotional definitions and your mental definitions are fully in alignment, then actions get super easy. It's just you just do things. So hopefully that last part made a little bit of sense. So let's look at setting yourself up for success, pleasure. So the way to succeed, identify all the parts or pieces to what you are avoiding and work on them in small chunks. Have the end goal so well set into the mind to feel highly rewarding. Make every task enjoyable or rewarding, and give gratitude every time you accomplish even the tiniest of tasks. Celebrate your completions every day or every single completion, and then really emphasize it. Affirm with emotions. Affirm with emotion that you love being productive, or I love how I'm making this happen, or I am so grateful that I'm just getting into action, whatever it may be. All right, caringly noted. Self-sabotage or personal limitation is typically not a quick fix. It could be a very quick fix. However, for the majority of people, it takes effort to get to the roots of your beliefs. I would say, with everything that was shared in this lesson, if you just stick to with isolating the parts or pieces to what it is you're actually trying to avoid or what you're procrastinating on, and you get really clear on all those parts and pieces, that helps a lot. That can definitely solve a lot of things. But then, if there's still something, okay, you're gonna have to look deeper. You're gonna have to go into the roots of your beliefs. You really start to question your perspectives, really start to question, okay, how did you begin to even perceive something the way that you perceive it? So in the next lesson, we will explore the roots of a belief. I'll be diving into this a little bit more. So none of these topics are light and fluffy, really. These 4 topics lessons address the real work needed to get you long-lasting, real results. These lessons have been well thought out based on, I think it's 15 years of research and experience. It is not in any way an easy approach to give someone information to solve a topic like personal limitations or self-sabotage in 4 simple lessons without the effort and support. It's, I just do what I possibly can to make it very condensed, make it very simplified, not have too much information, because sometimes too much information doesn't help either. So it takes conditioning and finding and changing beliefs to reprogram the subconscious, not just listening to information. So even after you go through these 4 days, it's really going to be about integration. So our life's nature is a combination of the mind, the emotions, the physical and spiritual aspect to who we are. So it's really important to work on all those levels. Don't just be a mental know-it-all, or you'll just be fooling yourself. It's really about integration. Yeah, I have a really big thing about know-it-alls. I used to be a know-it-all, and then somebody called me out on it. It's like, oh, well, have you been practicing it? I'm like, oh, no. And then I realized I was fooling myself the entire time. And so if it's in the head, you're missing the emotional level, the physical level, and the spiritual level. You don't know it all, because knowing it all is in the emotions, it's in the physical, and it's in the spiritual. Just in the mind, well, eventually that information's going to dissipate and it's going to entropy. You'll forget about it. And neurons that are not practiced and utilized basically are recycled into the brain or by the brain. And next thing you know, the information's gone. Then we may hear about it 5 years later. Oh, I already heard about this. It doesn't work. Well, have you integrated it? Have you actually practiced it? Have you integrated it through your emotional, physical, and even on the spiritual aspect of yourself? Most people will say no. And so this is what it's about, integration. All right, that's it for this lesson. Hopefully you found lots of value here. Thank you for tuning in. Bye for now.